"Where is the woman who came with you?" the guard asked, his voice cutting through the hum of idling engines and distant announcements like a dull knife. My husband, Robert, shifted in the driver's seat, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel just enough for me to notice the whitening of his knuckles. We were at the border crossing, the kind of place where fluorescent lights buzz overhead and the air smells faintly of exhaust and stale coffee from the booths. I sat beside him, passport in hand, my heart already fluttering from the usual travel nerves. But this felt different. Robert chuckled. That forced, easy laugh he used when closing a deal at work. "She's right here, officer," he said, gesturing toward me with a nod. "My wife Elena." The guard, a burly man with a mustache that twitched like it had a mind of its own, leaned out of his booth, peering into our car. His eyes flicked from Robert to me, then back, as if piecing together a puzzle. "No, sir. The other one. The brunette. You were here with her just 3 weeks ago. Same car, same route." He tapped his clipboard, the sound sharp against the quiet tension building in my chest. I felt the world tilt slightly, like the ground beneath the tires had softened. My mouth went dry, the taste of the mint I'd popped earlier turning bitter. Robert's face paled, his usual confident smile faltering into something I hadn't seen in years. "You must be mistaken," he muttered, but his voice cracked at the edges. The guard straightened, his hand moving toward the radio on his shoulder. "Step out of the vehicle, please, both of you." And just like that, minutes later, chaos erupted. Horns blared from the cars behind us as security swarmed, pulling us aside. I stood there on the cold asphalt, my arms wrapped around myself against the chill wind whipping through the lanes, watching as they searched our luggage. Whispers from other travelers floated like ghosts. "What's going on? Looks like trouble." Robert's protests grew louder, but I couldn't hear them over the roaring in my ears. Because in that moment, I knew. The pieces I'd ignored for months clicked into place, and the life I thought was ours shattered right there under the glaring lights. To understand how a simple question could unravel everything, I need to take you back to where it all began. To the quiet rhythm of our days before the shadows crept in. Our home in the suburbs of Chicago was the kind of place that felt like a warm embrace after a long day. The kitchen always smelled of fresh bread or simmering sauce, my domain, where I'd chop onions with the radio humming softly in the background, the knife's rhythmic thump grounding me. Robert and I had been married for 28 years, building a life brick by brick. He worked in sales for a manufacturing company, traveling often to seal deals across the Midwest. One managed the local library, surrounded by the musty scent of old books and the quiet shuffle of pages turning. Our 2 children, Mia and Lucas, are grown now, Mia teaching elementary school 2 states away, Lucas starting his own family with his wife in the city. Weekends were for family dinners, the table groaning under plates of lasagna and garlic bread, laughter echoing off the walls as we shared stories. Robert was the steady one, always had been. His hands, calloused from years of shaking on contracts, would rest on my shoulder in the evenings as we sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the yard. "Elena, you're my anchor," he'd say, his voice low and warm, like the crackle of a fire on a winter night. I believed him. Our mornings started with coffee black for him, a splash of milk for me poured into matching mugs we'd bought on our honeymoon in Mexico. He'd kiss my forehead before heading out, the faint scent of his aftershave lingering like a promise. "See you tonight, love." The kids visited often. Mia would call every Sunday, her voice bubbling over the phone as she described her students' antics. "Mom, little Timmy drew a picture of me as a superhero today." She'd laugh, and I'd feel that swell of pride in my chest. Lucas and his wife, Sarah, came for barbecues, their toddler wobbling around the grass, his chubby hands grasping at dandelions. Robert would scoop him up, tossing him gently in the air, the boys' giggles filling the air like music. Those moments felt eternal, woven into the fabric of who we were, a family that had weathered job losses, a miscarriage early on, and the empty nest syndrome with quiet resilience. I wasn't blind to the little strains. Robert's trips had increased over the past year, his suitcase packed more frequently with pressed shirts and ties. "Big clients, Elena," he'd explain, his eyes meeting mine with that reassuring gaze. "It's for our future, maybe that cabin by the lake we've talked about." I'd nod, pushing down the twinge of loneliness when the house echoed too loudly in his absence. Instead, I filled my days with book clubs and gardening. The earth cool under my fingers as I planted tulips, their bulbs promising spring's renewal. Life was good, predictable, like the steady tick of the grandfather clock in our hallway, or so I thought. But looking back, there were whispers of change, subtle as the first autumn leaf turning. It started with a phone call one evening, the kind that lingers in your mind like an unanswered question. It was a Tuesday evening in early spring, the kind where the air still carried a bite but the daffodils were pushing through the soil in the front beds. Robert had just returned from a 4-day trip to Toronto, another crucial client meeting. He'd said, I'd made his favorite pot roast, the house filled with the rich scent of rosemary and slow-cooked beef. He walked through the door, suitcase in hand, tie loosened, that tired but satisfied smile on his face. I met him in the hallway with a hug, breathing in the familiar mix of his cologne and the faint metallic smell of airplane cabins. Missed you, I murmured into his shoulder. Missed you more, Alina, he replied, kissing the top of my head. Everything felt normal. We sat down to dinner, the grandfather clock ticking steadily in the corner, plates clinking softly as we passed the mashed potatoes. He told me about the meetings, the steakhouse the team had gone to, how the deal was almost sealed. I listened, nodding, content to have him home. Later, as I washed the dishes, the phone rang. Robert was in the living room, scrolling through emails on his laptop. I dried my hands and picked up the landline. We still had one. Old habits die hard. Hello, a woman's voice, hesitant but warm. Hi, is Robert there? My stomach did a small flip, the way it does when something feels off but you can't place why. He's just stepped in from a trip. May I ask who's calling? There was a pause, long enough for the faucet to drip twice into the sink. It's Claire, from the office. I think I left something in his car during the drive back from the airport. Could you ask him to check? Claire. I knew most of the people in his office. Mark Denise, old Mr. Hargrove who was retiring soon. No Claire. But companies hire new people all the time, I told myself. Sure, hold on. I walked to the living room, phone in hand. Robert looked up, eyebrows raised. It's Claire from the office, I said, watching his face closely. She thinks she left something in your car. His expression flickered just a fraction of a second, a tightening around his eyes before the easy smile returned. Claire. Oh right, new admin assistant, helped me with some files at the airport pickup. He took the phone, turning slightly away. Hey Claire. Yeah. No, I haven't seen anything. Maybe it fell out in the parking lot. Okay, no worries. Take care. He hung up, handed the phone back. Nothing important, he said, shrugging. Some folder, she thought she dropped. I nodded, went back to the dishes. But the name lingered, Claire, and the way his shoulders had tensed, just for a moment. Over the next few weeks, little things started to pile up like dust in corners you don't notice until the light hits them right. Robert's phone would buzz more often in the evenings, and he'd angle the screen away, thumbs flying quickly before setting it face down. Work stuff, he'd mutter. Once, I caught a glimpse of a text preview, a heart emoji from a contact saved simply as C. I asked about it casually one morning over coffee. Who's C? He didn't miss a beat, stirring sugar into his mug. Claire, the new assistant. She's efficient, keeps me updated on schedules. Efficient, that word sat oddly in my mouth. I let it go. Then came the weekend trip he hadn't mentioned until the night before. Emergency meeting in Detroit, he said, packing his overnight bag. Clients demand. I'll be back Sunday afternoon. I helped him fold shirts, my fingers brushing his as I handed them over. Be safe, I said, kissing him goodbye at the door. The house felt emptier than usual that Saturday. I called Mia, chatted about her school play, watered the plants, and read a book in the quiet. But something gnawed at me. Sunday morning, I was in the laundry room, sorting clothes when I pulled his travel bag from the closet to unpack for him. A habit I'd kept since the early years. As I unzipped the side pocket for toiletries, a small bottle rolled out. Perfume. Not mine. A delicate glass vial, floral and light, the kind a younger woman might wear. The label read Jasmine Bloom. My brand was lavender, always had been. I stood there holding it, the cool glass against my palm, heart beginning to thud in a way that made the room feel smaller. Robert wasn't the type to buy gifts. He'd bring chocolates or a keychain, something small and thoughtful. This felt personal. When he came home that afternoon, arms full of grocery bags as a peace offering, I waited until we were unpacking in the kitchen. I set the bottle on the counter between us. This was in your bag. He froze, just for a heartbeat, then picked it up. Oh, Claire must have left it in the rental car. I grabbed the wrong bag at the airport pickup. Happens sometimes when we share rides. His voice was steady, eyes meeting mine without flinching. Share rides, rental cars. It made sense. I told myself. People forget things. But the scent lingered in my memory, sweet and unfamiliar, like an intruder in our home. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him, because the alternative was a crack in the foundation I wasn't ready to face. So I smiled, tucked the bottle away in a drawer, and made pasta for dinner. We ate on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft pinks, his hand resting on mine. Everything felt normal again, but doubt, once planted, has a way of sending out roots in the dark. The suspicions grew quietly, like weeds in a garden you think you've tended well. A few weeks after the perfume incident, Robert announced another trip, this one to the border town of Windsor, just across from Detroit. Quick turnaround, he said over breakfast, buttering his toast with deliberate strokes. Meetings with Canadian suppliers. I'll drive this time. Save on flights. I sipped my coffee, the steam curling up like unspoken questions. Drive? That's a long haul alone. Want company? I could take a day off. He paused, knife hovering midair. Nah, Alina, you'd be bored stiff in hotel lobbies. Besides, it's all business dinners with clients, that sort of thing. His smile was warm, but his eyes didn't quite hold mine. I let it slide, waving him off from the driveway that morning, watching his taillights fade down the street. The house settled into its familiar quiet, the refrigerator humming softly in the kitchen. I went to work, shelving books at the library, the papery scent calming my mind. But that evening, alone with a cup of tea, I found myself scrolling through our shared calendar apps, something we'd set up years ago for coordinating schedules. His entries were sparse. Windsor trip out till Friday. Thursday night, the phone rang late, jolting me from a half-dozen on the couch. It was MIA Mom. Just checking in. How's Dad's trip going? Fine, I think. He texted this morning, busy, as usual. We chatted about her class, the upcoming parent-teacher night. As we said goodbyes, she added casually, "Oh, and tell Dad, I saw his post on Facebook. Looks like he's having fun up there." Post. Robert wasn't big on social media. His account was mostly family photos. I tagged him in. I hung up and pulled up the app on my phone, fingers trembling slightly as I searched his profile. There it was, a photo from 2 days ago, geotagged in Windsor. Him at a cozy restaurant, glass of wine in hand, smiling at the camera. But he wasn't alone. A woman's arm was in the frame, manicured nails resting lightly on the tablecloth, a bracelet glinting under the lights. The caption, "Great company seals the deal. Hashtag business wins." My breath caught, the screen blurring for a moment. Who took the photo? And whose arm was that? I zoomed in, heart pounding. The bracelet looked familiar. No, not mine, but the setting, the intimate booth. It didn't scream business meeting. I didn't sleep much that night, the bedsheets twisting around me like doubts. When Robert called the next morning, his voice cheerful over the speaker, I kept my tone light. "How's Windsor?" "Productive. Heading back soon. Miss you." "Miss you too. Saw your post, looks nice." A beat of silence. "Oh yeah. Client, dinner." Phone's dying. "Talk later." Click. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, a knot tightening in my stomach. He returned that evening, flowers and handaleals, my favorite, their sweet scent filling the entryway. "For my patient wife," he said, pulling me into a hug. I held him, but my mind raced. Over dinner, I mentioned the photo casually. "Who was with you at the restaurant?" "Team from the office." Claire snapped the pic. "She's great at networking." He forked into his salad, not looking up. Claire again. The name hung in the air like smoke. I tried to push it down, focus on the good. We had a family barbecue planned for the weekend, Lucas and Sarah coming over with the baby. The yard buzzed with preparation. I mowed the grass, the fresh-cut smell sharp and green, while Robert fired up the grill, apron tied around his waist. Laughter filled the air as the kids arrived, the toddler chasing bubbles across the lawn. But even then, the phone calls came. Robert's cell vibrated twice during the meal, and he excused himself to the kitchen, voice low. I caught snippets. "Not now, later." Sarah noticed, her brow furrowing as she bounced the baby on her knee. "Is everything okay with Dad?" "Just work," I said, forcing a smile. But inside, the seeds of suspicion had sprouted, twisting through my thoughts. A month passed like that, small oddities stacking up. Receipts in his pockets for dinners I hadn't known about. A faint lipstick smudge on a shirt collar that he blamed on a crowded elevator. I started paying attention to his stories, the way they shifted slightly each retelling. And then, the border trip announcement came. "We need to finalize some cross-border deals," he said one evening, packing his suitcase with the efficiency of routine. "Quick drive to Niagara this time. Want to come? Make it a mini getaway." My heart lifted at the invitation. Maybe I'd been wrong, imagining shadows where there were none. I'd love that. We left early, the car humming along the highway, coffee steaming in travel mugs. Robert held my hand over the gearshift, singing along to oldies on the radio. It felt like us again, the miles slipping by under a clear sky at the border. The line was short. We pulled up to the booth, passports ready. The guard scanned them, then looked at Robert. "Where is the woman who came with you?" he asked. Minutes later, chaos erupted. In the holding room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees. They separated us. I sat on a hard plastic chair, clutching my purse, the air thick with the smell of industrial cleaner. Questions swirled in my head, but the officers were tight. "Routine check, ma'am." Robert was in another room. I could hear his voice rising through the wall, protesting innocence. When they finally let me see our car, luggage strewn across the pavement, my eyes landed on something in the trunk. A small jewelry box, tucked under a jacket. I opened it with shaking hands. A necklace, delicate gold chain with a heart pendant, engraved inside, "To Claire, with love." Are the world spun. Claire, not an assistant, not a colleague. The pieces crashed together, the calls, the trips, the perfume. This was no business partner. When they brought Robert in, his face ashen, I held up the box. "Explain." He sank into a chair, head in hands. "Alina, it's not what you think." But it was. Over the next hour, in that sterile room with guards outside, the truth spilled out like a dam breaking. Claire was 32, a sales rep from a partner company. They met at a conference last year. It started as flirting, he admitted, voice cracking. Then, more. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Tears burned my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "How long?" 8 months. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I love you, Alina. This was a mistake. She means nothing." Nothing. The word echoed hollowly. "And the border. She came with you before." He nodded, defeated. "A weekend away. I told you it was work." The guards cleared us eventually. No laws broken. Just a mistaken identity that unraveled a marriage. We drove home in silence, the highway stretching like an endless void. That drive home was the longest of my life. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dashboard, but inside the car, it felt like midnight. Robert tried to speak twice, mumbled apologies that dissolved into the hum of the engine. I stared out the window, watching fields blur by, my hands folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. The necklace box burned a hole in my purse, a tangible weight of betrayal. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, lights on a timer glowing warmly through the windows, the porch swing swaying gently in the breeze. But stepping inside, everything felt foreign. The air smelled of the potpourri I'd set out that morning, vanilla and spice, now cloying in my throat. I set my bag down with a thud that echoed too loudly. Double quotes. "Alina, please," Robert said, closing the door behind us. His voice was raw, eyes pleading. "Let me explain properly." I turned to him, feeling a calm settle over me, like a shrewd, not peace, but the numbness that comes before the storm. "Explain? You've had months to explain. Instead, you lied. Every trip, every late night, Claire." He winced at the name, sinking onto the couch. "It wasn't planned. She made me feel young again. Alive. After all these years, our routine. I got lost in it. Young. Alive." The words stung like salt in a wound. I paced the living room, the carpet soft under my feet, grounding me. And what about me? Was I just the routine? The wife who cooks and waits? No. He stood, reaching out. But I stepped back. "You're everything." This was stupid. A fling. "I'll end it. Call her right now." He pulled out his phone, fingers fumbling. I watched as he dialed, speaker on, the ringtone filling the room like an accusation. "Voicemail, Claire, it's over. Don't contact me again." He hung up, looking at me expectantly. But it wasn't enough. The hurt ran deeper, roots tangled and trust shattered. How do I know it's really over? How do I believe anything now? We talked or argued late into the night. Tears came, mine silent and steady, his choked and sporadic. He admitted details I didn't want but needed. Weekends disguised as work. Gifts bought with our joint account. Lies stacked like cards. By dawn, exhaustion won. We slept in separate rooms, the guest bed cold and unfamiliar under me. The next morning, over coffee that tasted like ash, I made a decision. "I need time," I said, stirring my mug without looking at him. "And space. Go stay with your brother for a few days." He nodded, defeated, packing a bag with the slowness of someone carrying a burden. As he left, hugging me awkwardly at the door, I felt a flicker of something resolve. Perhaps. Alone, the house whispered memories. Our wedding photo on the mantel, smiles frozen in time. The kitchen table where we'd planned our future. I sat there, tracing the wood grain with my finger, and picked up the phone. First, I called Mia. Her voice, bright at first, turned concerned as I spilled it all. The border. Claire, the necklace. Mom, oh God, what can I do? Just listen, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She did, offering quiet support, no judgments. Then Lucas. He was furious, protective. I'll come over. Dad's an idiot. No, I insisted. I need to handle this myself first. But handling it meant action. I wasn't one for dramatic revenge, no slashing tires or public shaming. That wasn't me. Instead, I turned to practicality. I logged into our bank accounts, the screen glowing in the dim study. There they were. Charges for hotels, restaurants, a jewelry store in Windsor. Hundreds, maybe thousands, siphoned from our savings. My savings tide contributed from my library job. Scrimping for that cabin dream. I printed statements, the printer worry like a judgment. Then, I called our lawyer. An old family friend named Harold. His office smelled of leather and old files when I met him the next day. Alina, I'm sorry, he said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the papers. This could be grounds for divorce, if that's what you want. But let's start with protecting your assets. We froze joint accounts, and transferred my share to a new one. It felt clinical, but necessary, like bandaging a wound before it festered. Robert called daily, pleading, come home. I texted once. We met at a neutral coffee shop, the aroma of fresh grounds masking the bitterness between us. I ended it, he said, showing deleted texts. Blocked numbers, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I sipped my latte, the foam clinging to the cup. Maybe, but trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Over the following weeks, I investigated quietly. I found Claire's LinkedIn professional photo, smiling brunette, sales rep as he'd said. No mention of him, but her posts about conferences matched his trips. I didn't contact her. What good would that do? Instead, I focused inward, joined a support group at the community center. Women sharing stories around a circle of folding chairs, the room smelling faintly of instant coffee. Their nods, their I've been there, eased the isolation. Action became my anchor. I repainted the bedroom, the brush strokes soothing, covering old walls with fresh blue. Gardened fiercely, pulling weeds with a vigor that mirrored uprooting lies. And I confided in a close friend, Martha from the library, over tea in her cozy kitchen. You're stronger than you know, she said, squeezing my hand. Robert moved back in tentatively, sleeping on the couch. We started counseling. The therapist's office neutral ground, her voice calm as we unpacked years of unspoken resentments. It was hard, tears, accusations, but a step. Yet, the real test came when the truth seeped out. As truths do in small communities, it started with a whisper. The way these things do in a town where everyone knows your business before you do. Our suburb wasn't small, but networks ran deep. Church groups, book clubs, the library where I worked, Robert's office circles. A few days after he moved back in, I noticed the glances at the grocery store. Mrs. Harlan from down the street, pushing her cart past the produce, paused just long enough to give me a pitying smile. Alina dear, how are you holding up? She asked, her voice laced with that false concern that masks curiosity. I straightened, apples in hand, their waxy skin cool against my palms. Fine, thank you. Why do you ask? She hesitated, adjusting her scarf. Oh, nothing, just heard about Robert's troubles? If you need anything. She trailed off, wheeling away before I could press. Troubles. The word lingered as I loaded bags into the car, the trunk slamming with more force than needed. At home, I confronted Robert in the kitchen, where he was chopping vegetables for stir-fry, the knife's rhythmic chop pausing mid-air. People know, I said flatly. What have you told them? He set the knife down, wiping his hands on a towel. Nothing. But, Claire called the office. Caused a scene when I wouldn't talk. Word got around. A scene. I could picture it, her showing up, perhaps teary-eyed, demanding answers in the lobby where receptionists have ears like radar. By evening, the phone calls started. First, my sister-in-law, Robert's brother's wife. Her voice hushed over the line. Alina, I heard from Mark at the company. Is it true? An affair? I gripped the receiver, the cord twisting around my finger. It's private, Janice. We're handling it. But privacy is a fragile thing. The next day at the library, my coworker Donna pulled me aside in the stacks, the air thick with the scent of aged paper. Sweetie, rumors are flying. That young woman from the partner firm, Claire. They say she's been bragging about trips with Robert. Bragging. The thought twisted like a knife. I shelved books with mechanical precision, spines aligning neatly, but inside, anger simmered. That evening, Lucas called, his tone sharp. "Mom, Sarah heard from a friend in sales. This is Claire telling people Dad promised to leave you." Robert, overhearing from the living room, paled. "That's a lie. I never," but the damage spread like ripples in a pond. At church that Sunday, the pastor pulled us aside after service, the organ's final notes fading in the background. "If you need counseling, my door's open." His eyes held sympathy, but behind him, parishioners whispered, heads bent close. The workplace was worse for Robert. He came home one evening, tie askew, face drawn. "Meeting with HR today," he muttered, sinking into his chair with a sigh that carried the weight of judgment. "Claire filed a complaint, said I led her on, affecting her performance. Colleagues are side-eyeing me. Even the boss pulled me in, talking about professional conduct." I poured him a glass of water, the faucet running cold and clear. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, not vengeance, but justice unfolding. "What did you expect? Lies have legs." He nodded, staring at the floor. "I know. Lost a big account too." Client heard the gossip, pulled out. The financial hit stung us both. Our savings already strained, but the social fallout deepened. Invitations dried up, no more neighborhood barbecues, no couples dinners. Mia flew in for a weekend, her hug fierce at the airport. People at my school even asked connections through Dad's work. It's everywhere. We sat on the porch that night, fireflies flickering like distant stars, the swing creaking softly under our weight. "How do we face this?" she asked, her hand in mine. "One day at a time," I replied, though my voice wavered. The climax came at the community fundraiser, a library event I'd organized. Tables laden with baked goods, the hall smelling of fresh coffee and cinnamon. Robert insisted on coming, to show unity. But midway through, Claire appeared. I spotted her across the room, brunette hair sleek, dress hugging her figure, chatting with a group that included Donna and a few office acquaintances. My heart thudded, the chatter fading to a buzz. She caught my eye, offered a small, defiant smile. Then, as if scripted, she approached. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, voice saccharine, "I've heard so much about you." The room hushed subtly, eyes turning. Robert froze beside me, hand on my arm. I kept my tone even, dignified. "Claire, I presume this isn't the place." She tilted her head, bracelet catching the light, the same one from the photo. "Oh, but it is. Robert and I shared so much. He said you two were drifting." Gasps rippled. I felt the heat rise, but held steady. "What we shared is a marriage. What you had was a mistake. And now, everyone knows." She flushed, glancing around at the staring faces. Donna stepped in, voice firm. "Claire, perhaps you should leave." She did, heels clicking sharply on the floor, the door swinging shut behind her. Whispers erupted, but not against Usa, against her audacity, his folly. By morning, the town's grapevine buzzed with her exit, her reputation tarnished. Robert's office placed her on leave. Rumors said she transferred out. Justice, quiet and inevitable. It didn't erase the pain, but it balanced the scales. As the community rallied to neighbors dropping off friends calling with support, I felt the weight lift, just a little. The dust settled slowly after that night at the fundraiser, the way autumn leaves drift down one by one, until the ground is covered. Claire disappeared from our circles. No more sightings at events, no more whispers of her name in office gossip. Word reached us through the grapevine that she'd taken a transfer to the West Coast branch. A quiet exit arranged by the company to avoid further drama. Robert's job stabilized, though the promotions he'd once been in line for slipped away like sand through fingers. He accepted it without complaint, the weight of consequence pressing on his shoulders in a way I could see in the new lines around his eyes. For me, the healing began in small, deliberate steps. I didn't rush forgiveness. I couldn't. Some mornings I woke with the ache still fresh, the border guard's question echoing in my dreams. But I chose to move forward, not because the pain vanished, but because staying stuck in it would have poisoned the rest of my life. Counseling continued twice a week at first, then once. The therapist's office had soft lighting and a ticking clock on the wall that marked time like a gentle heartbeat. We learned to speak honestly, Robert about his fears of aging, of losing relevance, me about feeling taken for granted, invisible in the routine we'd built. It wasn't pretty. There were sessions where I left with swollen eyes, driving home with the windows down to let the wind dry my tears. But slowly, something shifted. His hand would find mine across the table without prompting. He'd bring home flowers, not as an apology, but as a habit reborn. I rebuilt pieces of myself I'd let fade, took a watercolor class at the community center, the smell of fresh paint and turpentine filling Tuesday evenings. My first attempts were clumsy blues bleeding into greens, but the instructor's gentle encouragement reminded me that starting over doesn't require perfection. I joined a walking group with Martha and 2 other library friends, our footsteps crunching on fallen leaves along the river path, conversations drifting from books to grandchildren to quiet confessions of our own marital bumps. The children watched warily at first. Mia visited more often, her suitcase always half-packed in case I needed her to stay. One evening, as we sat peeling apples for pie, the kitchen warm with cinnamon and sugar, she asked softly, "Are you sure about this, Mom? Staying?" I paused, knife in hand, the apple's tart scent sharp in the air. "I'm sure about choosing peace. Whether that includes your father long-term, we're taking it day by day." Lucas was harder. He kept distance from Robert, polite but cool. During a family dinner roast chicken, the table set with the good china, he finally spoke across the candles. "Dad, I love you, but what you did, it hurt Mom. It hurt all of us." Robert's fork stilled. He looked at his son, eyes glistening. "I know. I'm sorry I can't fix it, but I'm trying to show it every day." The room held its breath until Lucas nodded, just once. It wasn't absolution, but it was a door cracked open. Time became my quiet ally. A year passed, then 2. The garden flourished, tulips giving way to roses, then mums in autumn gold. I planted a new bed along the fence, lavender and rosemary, their scents drifting through open windows on summer evenings. Robert helped without being asked, kneeling beside me in the dirt, hands soiled as we pressed roots into earth. Those moments felt like mending, silent, steady. We took a trip, just the 2 of us, to the lake cabin we'd once dreamed of, not buying one yet, but renting a small place on the water. Mornings were spent on the dock, coffee steaming in the crisp air, loons calling across the mist. One night, stars thick overhead, he said quietly, "I almost lost this." "Lost you?" I leaned against his shoulder. We both almost lost ourselves. There was no grand gesture of renewal, no second honeymoon vow recital. Instead, small rebuildings, him cooking breakfast on weekends, plates clattering as he flipped pancakes, me leaving notes in his lunch when he traveled, fewer trips now, and always with check-ins. Evenings on the porch, swing again, hands entwined. The creak of chains, a familiar lullaby. I found strength I didn't know I had. Promoted to head librarian, I led story hours with a confidence that surprised even me. Children gathered cross-legged on the carpet, eyes wide. I volunteered at the women's shelter, listening to stories far heavier than mine, offering the same steady presence others had given me, and forgiveness. It came not in a lightning moment, but in droplets. The day I deleted the saved border crossing news article from my phone. The evening I wore the necklace he'd bought me years ago, not the one meant for Claire. In the morning I woke without the knot in my chest. We never spoke of her again. She became a shadow that faded, irrelevant to the life we were choosing. Looking back from where I sit now in that same porch swing, a quilt over my knees, as autumn wind rustles the last leaves, I see it clearly. Betrayal cracked us open, but what grew in the fracture was something truer. Not perfect, never perfect again, in that naive way, but honestly, deliberate, chosen daily. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to tend a garden after a storm, to stay when leaving would be easier, to forgive not for them, but for the peace of your own heart. Robert's hand rests on mine now as we watch the sunset paint the sky, the same ritual we've kept for decades, only now with eyes wider open. The grandfather clock ticks inside, steady as ever. Life goes on, scarred but blooming. And so, my dear, that's the story of how a single question from a border guard, "Where is the woman who came with you?" shattered the quiet illusion I'd been living in, and then, slowly, gently, helped me build something sturdier in its place. I won't tell you that forgiveness was easy, or that the hurt vanished like morning mist. Some days it still catches in my throat when I smell a certain perfume in a crowded store, or when Robert reaches for his suitcase and old shadows whisper in my ear. But pain, like everything else, softens at the edges with time if you let it, if you choose to tend the garden instead of burning it down. What I learned, more than anything, is that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice that says, "I will try again tomorrow." Sometimes it's staying when every instinct screams. Sometimes it's letting someone earn their way back into your heart, one honest day at a time. And sometimes when staying would cost too much of yourself. It's the courage to walk away with your head high and your dignity intact. I stayed, not because I'm weak, but because I'm strong enough to choose what I want my life to look like, not just what anger demands. So I ask you now, from my porch swing, on this quiet evening, with the scent of lavender drifting on the breeze and Robert's hand warm in mine, if this had been your marriage, your trust broken open under harsh lights, would you have found the strength to rebuild? Or would you have chosen a different path? Tell me in the comments, my love. Share your hard time listening. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own hidden scars or quiet triumphs, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone, and subscribe so we can walk these roads together. Until next time, take care of your hearts.